Hello, I'm Kate Jones, here with another excerpt from a recent interview that I did with philanthropist and author Iris November and two of her four daughters, the Reverend Rachel Hollander, also an author, and Anita Hollander, an actress, composer, director, and teacher who lives in New York City and has worked throughout Europe, Asia, Russia, and America. In this episode, we're focusing on Anita, her career, her advocacy work, and the challenges of being a performer with a disability.
So, Anita, how did you make it to New York City? And what inspired you to become a multi-talented performer and an advocate, too? I want to make sure we cover that.
Well, it seems to go right along with my life, but I was born into this. I was born with the performing gene because my grandmother, mom's mom, Celeste Corrine Flaxman, was a vaudeville dancer. She danced on the vaudeville circuits, toured around, and we have great pictures. There's one of her leaning against the proscenium wearing a leopard skin and nothing else.
And that was a long time ago.
Way long ago.
I would like to see that. We need a picture of that.
Yes. A word description. She was amazing. And she died of cancer 6 years before I was born. And I came into the world screaming and screamed for 1 year solid, at the end of which I jumped out of my crib and got a little concussion, which of course made me go into show business because you have to have definitely a problem with your brain to go into show business. I was born with a lot of her qualities and her face. I turned 40 and my mom was looking at me going, "You look exactly like my mom. You look exactly like my mom." I definitely am her. So I had no choice. I'm going into show business. Unfortunately, mom supported that. Dad supported that with taking me to an audition when I was 8 years old. And I got my first professional job in The Sound of Music in Cleveland at Music Carnival. It was a professional theater. Wally Harper was conducting the orchestra, who went on to be Barbara Cook's musical director. I mean, these were people whose names were from Broadway. And I was 8 years old and I was understudying the part of Gretel, the youngest of the Von Trapp children in The Sound of Music. And the actress who played Gretel was generous enough to get German measles for 3 nights, and I got to go on. She was a very generous girl. And the show was so successful, they brought it back the next year, and I got my own role, which was Marta. I grew 2 inches and got to be the second daughter. Anyways, from then on, it was all theater, all music, all dance, all the time. My sisters and I all sang together at shopping malls and events and television. And growing up, we sang all the time. And Dad, being a cantor at the synagogue and a big Broadway enthusiast and a performer at city club shows, he was a ham. So we all were born into this, but I was definitely going to go into this as a career. I knew this, so I gained a resume over the years in Cleveland, performing at all the theaters and like playing Martha Jefferson in 1776 when I was 16 years old. Anyways, at 21 at Carnegie Mellon University, working on getting a degree in acting because I'd been singing all along, but I wanted more acting training. I was diagnosed with cancer in my leg. And 6 weeks after that surgery, I went back to school because I was not having it as far as not graduating with my class. So I graduated with my class the next year and went on to summer stock and then went to Europe and studied at Lambda, London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art, and toured Europe with a company, came back and got a recurrence of the cancer in my leg while I was directing Jacques Brel Is Alive and Well and Living in Paris in Boston, because I came back from Europe and I was living in Boston, getting a show up, directing it and performing in it. And my leg was hurting and it was terrible. And then I found out I had to have my leg amputated. So I had my leg amputated at Mass General, went back to rehearsals 2 weeks later, staged the rest of the show on one leg and opened in the show 4 weeks after the amputation. My favorite story to tell. It's really amazing because I was lucky enough to have Grandma Celeste and Mom and Dad and all the people along the way in my life who believed that there was nothing that was ever going to stop me. So I did open the show, did run the show, and there were a couple of features that came out about me doing that, and it helped me. And few years later, I got a job teaching at NYU, which got me down to New York City, which was my end game goal all my life. And I've been there since 1983, a year after the amputation. And what comes along with having cancer and first having a brace on my leg and touring Europe and then losing my leg and going on stage. What comes along with that is advocating, because you are already an advocate when you walk on the stage on one leg or on an artificial leg or with a brace on your leg. You're automatically an advocate because you're saying, if I could do this, you can do this. And fortunately, the Today Show did a nice piece about it in 1991 after I'd gotten married, had a child, and doing this on one leg. And they were like, we have to tell this story. So that helped a lot. I was opening for comics at the Improvisation Comedy Club on 44th Street by Times Square, around the corner, opening for Robin Williams, Larry David, Ray Romano, all those great folks. And they put this out there on the Today Show, which was great. So my way of giving back was that I could help others to get work in this industry. And there's no easy way to get work in this industry, no matter what you are, no matter how many legs you have, no matter how absolutely gorgeous or talented or whatever you might be. It's still hard to get a job, but it's even harder if you have a disability. It's harder even to get into an audition. So I became the national chair of performers with disabilities at SAG-AFTRA, which is Screen Actors Guild. And also I've served as a council member at Actors Equity, which is the stage version of the union. And in each case, charting where we are in television, radio, theater, movies, all those things, and showing the industry that there's not enough of us out there, and there's not enough authentic representation. And now we've tripled our employment on TV. And some of us have gotten Oscars now and Tony Awards. And I mean, it's so much different than it was in 1980 when I started to be this loud pioneer. I never hit anybody over the head. I do things gently. I always have a smile on my face. I'm not angry. I'm just saying, to Hollywood producers, we can benefit from this both. So I'm not here to yell at you. I'm here to tell you, if you get more of us on TV or in a film, you're going to have more sponsors. You're going to have more backers. You're going to have more audience. It's a win-win. And I do think I've learned all this from my mother, actually, because she's so good at letting people know that if you give to this hospital wing, this is a win-win. Because you may have a grandchild with autism and you're going to need that. Or you may have a mom who has cancer and you're going to need that breast cancer wing, and you're going to need this library and this nature center and this, it totally goes through the family. It's not me being anything new. The only thing new about me was that, and critics have said, she was obviously ahead of her time, was nobody was going out on stage writing shows, writing musicals about having one leg. That was a new thing. And when I first introduced my first original show.
Was that still standing?
That was still standing. Boy, you've done your research. I premiered it at a cabaret called Don't Tell Mamas on Theater Row on 46th Street. And everybody was like, I don't know if this is the kind of show you want to do in a cabaret. I had been showcasing the work of many writers because I was in the BMI workshop and the ASCAP workshop for writers because I write my own music. And they were like, hey, this is like a bridge too far. Who's going to want to come and see a show about cancer and losing a leg? But it's very funny. At any rate, I had a following. And Sydney Meyer, who was running Don't Tell Mama, said, hey, if it's you, I know we're going to get an audience. And I don't know if it's going to go well or not, but give it a try. Nowadays, every cabaret show you see has to do with the thing they went through, the difficult thing they went through in life. And either they write it themselves or they're picking Broadway show tunes or show tunes that talk about going through something difficult. So when I've been reviewed more recently, the Boston Globe said, well, she obviously was ahead of her time. She's been doing this for a while. And it is true. It's hard to be a pioneer because by the time people notice that you were a pioneer, you're a lot older. But Fortunately, I'm still getting TV work and theater work. And I just came back from Alabama where I set the music of all of these writers with disabilities. I set them to music in a theater piece called From Where I Sit. And these writers had never performed before. And I got them singing in 3-part harmony. And I just had the best time.
Is that going to be a stage show or is that going to be a recorded show?
It's a stage show that can be seen online if you look at From Where I Sit and you just write Alabama. They did a video, 2 versions. So my mom could see it because she was in Cleveland.
I watched both of them, honey, and they were amazing. And I loved the participation of all the performers who had never performed before and suddenly found a weight lifted off of their shoulders. Some were in wheelchairs, some on crutches, and they were performing with such joy. That was the basic line of the show, Anita. There was so much joy in the performance, truly. I have to add one thing to my darling daughter's conversation here. Before she was in her teens, Dad and I took the 4 girls to New York, mainly to show them, well, we saw plays. We saw 5 plays in 4 days. 4 days.
2 days.
Oh my God, we were crazy and prices were a lot better. But at that time it was still high priced. But we kept driving Anita down to the lower village where the laundry was hanging from the windows, from window to window, where there was garbage all over the streets. And we kept saying to each other, your dad and I, maybe we can talk her out of this. And by God, she kept saying, oh, this is so beautiful. Oh my God, I love it here. We lost the battle totally.
Clearly.
That's true, Mom. It was weird. The dirtiest city in the whole world, and I couldn't get enough of it.
Is Still Standing also in recorded form?
Actually, there is a performance of it on YouTube. If you go on YouTube and you look up Anita Hollander, you can find a lot of those things. Also, Spectacular Falls, which is the second show I wrote. The first one, Still Standing. Second show, Spectacular Falls. The third one is going to be, and I'm working on it now, it's called Balance, a Footnote. Balance, a footnote, which will be the end of the trilogy. But Rachel is such a big part of this. Not only is she mentioned in both of these shows and sung about, she's gone with me to perform this in many different cities because she does the sign language. And not just over on the side, she's with me. And on the song in Still Standing called Lazy Day, which is all about her coming to visit me while I was on chemo and radiation and everything, we switch parts. It's really very funny.
It's very
meta because my voice is coming through on the soundtrack, but I'm being Rachel because Rachel was a goofburger. I mean, she was so great. She would come into town and I was like, ugh, and she'd go, we're going to go to the movies. We're going to have pizza. No, I can't eat pizza. Yes, we're going to eat. I mean, she was like my cheerleader and we'd bop around Pittsburgh and she would just really cheer me up. So I wrote this jazzy song about her. So the two of us are on stage being just totally crazy. I've had a children's choir for 28 years with whom I write songs. And at one point in Spectacular Falls, we talk about people who fall through the cracks. And that's the immigrant people right now, more than ever. But this was back in 2020 or something. And it was the kids' idea to say welcome in 20 different languages. So everyone went home and found out where they came from. And we used all the languages. I told Rachel, at this point in the show, you sit down and relax. This is your little intermission. And I will sign the show or interpret the show to the voices of my children's choir singing this song about immigrants. So I worked my butt off to learn from Rachel. I am studying ASL, but I'm never going to be as good as she is. But I worked it out and she corrected me when I had it wrong. And she made sure that I could just stop singing for a minute and sign and have the voices of the children. So Rachel's really such an integral part of all this stuff.
I think it was when you were on Sally Jesse Raphael.
Yeah.
They dubbed her a woman of courage.
Oh, no, that was the Evening Magazine in Boston.
And can I tell you what it's like to be not only in the family of, but the younger sibling of a woman of courage.
Oh, do tell.
Anita, you want to talk about being a woman of courage?
Yeah, I never really loved that. I think maybe it actually was the Today Show in 1991, the day that we went into Iraq. There was an hour and 50 minutes of war stuff, and then they put me on. The last 10 minutes, it was called People You Should Know, but they labeled the piece about me, Woman of Courage. And honestly, that really didn't feel good to me. The old brave thing, inspiration, courage, all that stuff was a little much. But at any rate, at the end of the Today Show story, they go back to Betty Friedan and Deborah Norville. And Betty says, yeah, she's wonderful. There are things she can't do. She can't dance, but there are so many other things she can do. And Deborah, who was pregnant at the time, goes, and I'm sure she'll do every one of those things. And that's how they ended the Today Show. It was like, first of all, I could dance, and I was dancing. And Rachel will tell you, Rachel and I were in Pump Boys and Dinettes together.
She tap dances better than me on an artificial leg. She tap dances better than me.
And she was like, I can't do this. I'm going, I can do this. We're going to both do this. And we did a little soft shoe. I mean, thanks to Mom, I was trained in tap, ballet, modern, jazz. I had all that training. So when the artificial leg came into the picture, I just used that. And then I also have danced with companies just on one leg. The big something-a-tron in Times Square, those big screens once had me from the waist down in this white flowy skirt and my leg, just me on a pedestal for an hour dancing on one leg. And there I was, the Jumbotron in Times Square, my leg and my skirt and my foot. And I was like, that's me. That's me up there.
It was the leg of courage.
The leg of courage.
Leg of courage.
So true. So true. Just one last thing. And I want Rachel to talk because she's incredibly extraordinary. Just that if you wanted to know any more about me, it would be AnitaHollander.com. And all of this stuff is in there. You can see anything you want. Plus a great photo that Susan Rosenberg Jones, the photographer, took of me with my biceps out and just standing on one leg on the pier of the Hudson River. I love the picture. That's the cover of the website. So AnitaHollander.com.
Okay. Well, what the website doesn't capture so much is your sense of humor and the lightness that comes with this and the passion that you have for performing and advocacy and everything that you do, directing, etc. And that is what's so wonderful about hearing you speak.
Thank you.
For more, please check out the other 5 excerpts, or if you have the time, the full episode. It's quite an extraordinary conversation. Thank you for listening to Everyday Creation.